For the materials, first, you will need around 37 yards of white Jumbo 7 Chunky Chenille Yarn. You can choose whichever brand you want. You will also need around 10 yards of teal blue Chunky Chenille Yarn. This one is for the whale. Around 13 yards of ube violet, and this one is for the baby dolphin. Around 10 yards of orchid pink, and this one is for the baby narwhal. Around 2 yards of sunshine yellow, and this is for the narwhal as well. You will also need around 10 yards of black Chunky Chenille yarn, and this is for the baby orca. You will also need 10 pieces of around 8 inches long black Chunky Chenille yarn. These will be for the eyes. So you will need 2 pieces per baby animal. Okay? Next, you will also need lighter, scissors, and polyfill. Now once you have all the materials ready, let's jump right into it. Alright, so we are going to use white colored Chunky Chenille yarn for all 5 sea animals. Okay? Leave around 10 inches tail, then create a slip knot. Cross your working yarn over to the left. Insert your fingers through the loop, grab your working yarn and pull it through. Now you just created your first chain. For the foundation chain, you will need a total of 14 chains. So insert your fingers through the loop, grab your working yarn and pull it through. Make sure to make each chain a size of your 2 fingers. Now you have 2 chains. Continue creating your chains until you have a total of 14 chains. Next, turn your foundation chain into a circle. I'm just going to put the tail here in the middle so it's out of the way. And this is your working yarn right here. Okay? For row 1, we are going to knit through each of the top loops of our foundation chain. Right here. Here is the top loop. Right here. Here. So we're going to knit through all of these top loops right here. All the way around. Okay? So now, insert your finger through your first top loop. Grab your working yarn and pull it through. Make sure to make each loop a size of your 2 fingers. Now, this is your first loop for row 1. Do not count this one as your loop, okay? Because this is your 14th chain from the foundation chain. So this is not a loop. Okay? Knit through the rest of the top loops until you have a total of 14 loops. So I'm going to knit through the second top loop here. And I'm just going to continue knitting until I have a total of 14 loops. Some people mark their first loop, but since I do not have a marker, I just count my loops in my head. But if you have a marker, please use that one if you want to. Okay. Now let's count our loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. For row 2, knit through all 14 loops. At the end of row 2, fold your project in half. This is to avoid big gaps in between your stitches. So this is my last loop and this is my first loop, and I'm just going to fold it right here. Okay, and we are going to knit clockwise. For row 3, knit through all 14 loops. Again, we are knitting clockwise. Okay. Next, we're going to cut our white yarn, but if you are making a baby beluga, you don't have to cut your white yarn, okay? So, if you're making a baby whale, baby dolphin, orca, or narwhal, leave around 3 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Next, we are going to change color. So we're going to attach a different color of yarn. If you're making a whale, change color to teal blue. If you're making a narwhal, change color to Barbie pink. And if you're making an orca, change color to black. And if you're making a dolphin, change color to ube violet. Okay, so right now I'm gonna make whale, so I'm gonna use this teal blue, and I'm going to tie it to my white yarn, like so. I tied it twice just to secure. Now for row 4 to row 10, knit 14 for each row. Next, leave around 10 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Now we're going to close the bottom part of the body. Insert the tail through each of the bottom loops of your foundation chain. Right here. Here are the bottom loops. Okay, here are the bottom loops, and we're gonna insert the tail through each of the bottom loops from inside to outside. Gently pull your yarn through as you go. Go through some of the loops one more time until you fully close the gap. Once the gap is closed, tie the tail to some of the stitches. Like so. Then tuck the remaining tail inside. Just gonna use the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. Now stuff it with polyfill. Now we're gonna close this up. Insert the tail through all 14 loops from inside to outside. You can pull your yarn as you go, but do not pull your yarn too hard, okay? Just do it gently. Now gently pull your yarn through until you fully close the gap. Go through some of the loops one more time to secure. Now, tie the tail to some of the stitches. Then, tuck the remaining tail inside. Again, I'm going to use the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. So now we're going to make the tail. So since I am making a whale, I'm going to use this teal blue color. But if you're making a dolphin, use your ube violet color yarn. And if you're making an orca, use your black yarn. And if you're making a narwhal, use your orchid pink yarn. And use your white yarn if you are making a beluga. Next, eyeball where you want to place the tail. So for me, I'd like to place it right here. So I'm positioning my baby whale with the white part of it on top, and then the blue part is here on the bottom. Okay? So now once you know or you've decided where you want to place the tail, leave around 3 inches tail, then pull a loop through the stitch where you want to place the tail. So I'm going to pull a loop right here. Next, pull another loop through the stitch next to it on the left, right here. I'm going to pull another loop through this stitch. Now you have 2 loops. Next, knit through the first loop right here. Then purl through the same loop. So I'm going to purl through the same loop right here. So when you purl, we are pulling a loop from front to back. Just like that. Okay? Now you have 2 loops. Knit through the next loop. Then purl through the same loop. So I'm gonna purl through the same loop right here. You should now have a total of 4 loops. Okay, let me show you how to make the purl stitch again. Okay, so first we're gonna knit. So we are pulling a loop from back to front. So that's the knit stitch. And we're gonna purl through the same loop. We're gonna pull a loop from front to back. Okay? So now you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 loops. Now, knit through each of the next 2 loops. 1, 2. Then we are going to skip the next 2 loops right here. Okay, we're not gonna work on these 2 loops right here on the left. Okay, next is cross your left loop on top of your right loop. Then knit through both. Now you have 1 loop left. Leave around 6 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Next is we're gonna work on these 2 loops that we skipped earlier. I'm gonna use the same color of yarn I used for the body and the right part of this tail. What we're gonna do is first leave around 6 inches tail, then knit through each of the 2 loops that we skipped earlier. I'm gonna knit through this loop first, then knit through the next loop. Now cross your right loop on top of your left loop, then knit through both. Now you should have 1 loop left. Leave around 6 inches tail, then cut your yarn. So now we are going to insert the tail from the left part of your whale's tail. Insert this tail through your very last loop here and gently pull it through until it's snug, like so. Then weave in the tail until you reach one of the stitches of the body where you can tie the tail and tuck it in. Okay, I'm just gonna weave in this tail right here. Now I am going to tie the tail to some of the stitches here and then tuck the remaining tail inside. I'm gonna use the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. Now I'm just gonna weave in this other tail right here until I reach some of the stitches of the body wherein I can tie it and tuck it inside. I'm gonna weave it in here, and then I'm gonna tie it to some of the stitches and tuck the remaining tail inside. Again, I'm gonna use the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. And you're basically gonna do the same thing for the rest of the tail. So this one, I'm just gonna insert the tail through the very last loop and gently pull it through until it's snug. And I'm gonna weave in the tail until I reach some of the stitches here where I can tie it and tuck the excess yarn inside. Now I'm gonna tie it and tuck it inside. And I have one more. There's one more tail left here, and I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna tie it to some of the stitches and tuck the remaining tail inside. Alright, now the tail is all done. Now it's time to make the fins. We're gonna make the left fin first, okay? So eyeball where you want to place the left fin. Use the same color of yarn you used for the body. So since I'm making a whale, I'm gonna use this teal blue color. Leave around 3 inches tail, then pull a loop through the stitch where you want to place the fin, like so. Pull another loop through the stitch next to it on the left, right here. Now you have 2 loops. Knit 2 for one more row. 1, 2. Since we're making the left fin, we are going to cross right. So cross your left loop on top of your right loop, then knit through both. Now you have 1 loop left. Leave around 4 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Now insert the tail through your last loop and gently pull it through until it's snug. Weave in the tail until you reach the other tail. Just gonna weave it in here. Just like that. Now tie both tails. Then tuck them inside. Again, I'm gonna use the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. So we're basically gonna do the same thing for the right fin except for the last row, which is we are going to cross left. Alright, so make sure that it's aligned to the left fin. Okay, again, leave around 3 inches tail, then pull a loop through the stitch where you want to place the right fin. Then pull another loop through the stitch next to it on the left. Now you have 2 loops, knit 2 for one more row. Now we're gonna cross left. Cross your right loop on top of your left loop, then knit through both. Leave around 4 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Insert the tail through your last loop and gently pull it through until it's snug. Then weave in the tail until you reach the other tail. Now, tie both tails. Then, tuck them inside. All right, and now the left and right fins are all done. Skip this part if you're making a whale, narwhal, or beluga. Use your ube violet color Chunky Chenille yarn if you're making a dolphin, and use your black color Chunky Chenille yarn if you are making an orca. Eyeball where you want to place the top fin. So it should be right here. So I positioned my baby dolphin with the tail on my right side and its mouth on my left side. Okay? Leave around the 3 inches tail, then pull a loop through the stitch where you want to place the top fin. So I'm going to pull a loop right here. Next, pull another loop through the stitch next to it on the right here. Now you have 2 loops. Knit 2 for 1 more row. 1, 2. Then cross your left loop on top of your right loop, then knit through both. Now you have 1 loop left. Leave around 4 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Next, insert the tail through your last loop and gently pull it through until it's snug. Now weave in the tail until you reach the other tail. Now tie both tails. Then tuck them inside. The top fin is all done. Skip this part if you're making whale, narwhal, orca, or beluga. What we're gonna make right now is the dolphin's rostrum. Use your ube violet color Chunky Chenille yarn. Then eyeball where you want to place the rostrum. Leave around 3 inches tail, then pull a loop through the stitch where you want to place the rostrum, right here. Pull another loop through the stitch next to it on the right. Now you have 2 loops. Next is we're going to change color to white. So leave around a size of your thumb tail and then cut your yarn. Then grab your white Chunky Chenille yarn. I'm just going to trim the end. This is just to make the burning method easier. Then we're going to attach these two together using the burn method. So I have my lighter here and I'm just gonna burn the end part of my white color Chunky Chenille yarn and the ube violet color Chunky Chenille yarn. I'm just burning that plastic center piece of each yarn. And then now I'm just gonna connect them together. I'm pressing it just to make sure they are attached. And you're gonna feel that knot. Okay, do the stress test. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we are going to pull a loop through the back stitch of your second loop right here. I'm gonna pull a loop right here. Like so. Next, pull another loop through the back stitch of your first loop right here. Now you should have a total of 4 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Next is we're going to change color to violet. So leave around a size of your thumb tail, then cut your white yarn. Then we're just gonna attach the violet color Chunky Chenille yarn using the burn method. Knit through the next 2 loops. 1, 2. Then we're gonna change color to white using the burn method. Now knit through each of the next 2 loops. 1 and 2. Next, leave around 6 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Now insert the tail through all 4 loops from inside to outside. Gently pull your yarn through as you go. Now insert the tail through all 4 loops one more time. Weave in the tail until you reach the other tail. Now tie both tails. Then tuck them inside. Now the baby dolphin's rostrum is all done. Next is we're gonna make the narwhal's tusk. For the tusk, use your sunshine yellow Chunky Chenille yarn, then eyeball where you want to place the tusk. Leave around 3 inches tail, then pull a loop through the stitch where you want to place the tusk. Like so. Pull another loop through the stitch next to it on the right. Then pull another loop through the back stitch of your second loop, right here. Now you have 3 loops. Knit 3 for 4 more rows. Now leave around 4 inches tail, then cut your yarn. Next, insert the tail through all 3 loops from inside to outside. Gently pull your yarn through until you fully close the gap. Go through all 3 loops one more time to secure. Now, tie the tail to some of the stitches. Then tuck it inside. Use the tip of your scissors to help push the yarn in. Now tie the other tail to some of the stitches. Like so. Then tuck it inside. Again, I'm using the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. And now, the narwhal's task is all done. Now, it's time to make the orca's white patches. For these, cut 2 pieces of about 8 inches long of your white chunky chenille yarn. You're going to use 1 piece per patch. So I already did the left white patch, but we're just gonna do the same thing for the right patch, and that's what I'm gonna show you. Eyeball where you wanna place the white patch. It should be right here on top of the fin. Here. Okay, so now insert your yarn through the stitch where you wanna place the white patch. Then gently pull your yarn through the stitch where you want the white patch to end. Now this one is totally up to you how wide you want the white patch to be. So it could be 1 inch or 2 inches wide, so that really depends to you. So this one is about 1 inch. But if you want a wider white patch, you can just like pull your white yarn through the next stitch, so that will make the white patch a little bit wider. Okay, so that really depends to you, but I am okay with about 1 inch wide white patch. Okay, so I'm cool with this one. So now I'm gonna pull my yarn through. Do not pull it through all the way. Make sure to leave around like 2 inches tail here. Then wrap around the other tail to the stitch where you first inserted your yarn through. And then I'm just gonna pull it through the stitch where I want the white patch to end, like that. Do not pull your yarn too hard, okay? Then I'm gonna do it one more time. I'm gonna wrap this around one more time, like so. Now, tie both tails. I'm just gonna bring this other tail here so it's closer to the other tail. And then now I'm gonna tie both tails. Then tuck the remaining tails inside. Again, I'm gonna use the tip of my scissors here to help push the yarns in. Just do the same thing for the other white patch of your orca. For the eyes, use 1 8 inches long black chunky chenille yarn for each eye. Next, eyeball where you want to place the eyes. Now insert your yarn through the stitch where you want to place the eye. Then gently pull your yarn through for about 2 inches long for the tail. Like that. Now wrap around the other tail through the same stitch. Like so. Now tie both tails. Then tuck them inside. Again, I'm going to use the tip of my scissors to help push the yarn in. Do the same thing for the other eye and for the rest of your sea animal's eyes. And then you're all done.